Hey guys! Today we're going to be counting down the top 50 Big Brother players. We're going to be ranking them based on how well they played the game, not how likable they are, and then for this list we're only going to be doing Big Brother 23 and before, no Canadians, no D-list celebrities, no other spin-offs. Alright, let's start off with number 50.
50.
Josh from Big Brother 19 is the That 80s show of Big Brother winners because of how little agency he had over the game. While he recognized that Paul was running the game and a big threat to win, Josh still did whatever Paul said and took Paul to the final two. To Josh's credit, throwing Paul under the bus in the goodbye messages was a good move and helped tarnish Paul's reputation in the jury. Josh won with a narrow 5-4 vote due to an anti-Paul voting block in the jury house. In Big Brother 22, Josh was promptly taken out in week 0 due to a backdoor play by a positive COVID test.
49.
Matt Hoffman from Big Brother 12 is known for creating one of the greatest alliances in Big Brother history. In his first weeks, Matt informed the other house guests that his wife had a terrible case of melanocytosis, a bone disease that can only be cured by winning the number 3 rated CBS reality show of 2010. The lie about his wife is one of the most morally questionable things done on the show, but it's undeniable that it garnered him sympathy from other house guests. It was a bold move that few others on the show would ever consider. While it's not entirely clear who created the Brigade Alliance, Matt was certainly a strong force in keeping the alliance safe pre-jury. When Brendan wins HOH, Matt's alliance members plan to vote him out. He only saves himself because of a secret veto power that he acquired a couple weeks before. He uses the power to take out a non-factor player in Kathy, and as a result, in the next week, Matt gets targeted post-veto and sent home with no attempt to blow up his former alliance, who betrayed him.
48. James Ryan from Big Brother 6 and 7 played hard twice to get his 2 7th place finishes. In Big Brother 6, after swearing on the Bible and breaking his word, James was able to win 4, kind of 5 vetoes to get himself from week to week. James's playing of the middle helped him get through other weeks, where the HOH would rather take out a full opposition instead of like a kind of opposition in James. In Big Brother 7, James again played all sides of the house. He was able to keep this going pretty long until Chilltown betrayed him at Final 7. James was a small player in a group of all-stars, though notably he would become a much bigger player after the season.
47.
James from Big Brother 17 and 18 was able to place well on 2 separate occasions playing very different games. In Big Brother 17, James, despite having very little control of the game, made some solid bonds with other house guests. When he gained some control in Week 5, James was willing to break his word to make the biggest move in the game at that point. He eventually left in 7th place as the house target and was unable to win out. In Big Brother 18, James played a very passive game and was generally in control and stayed off the block until the final 6. Unlike in the Wichita Falls mayoral race, James was able to win the votes over Natalie. He drew dead at the final 3 as no one was taking him to the finals and he was unable to win the final HOH. Even if James had won the final HOH, it's unlikely he would have had the jury votes to win.
46.
Christmas from Big Brother 19 and 22 wasn't a particularly standout player, but her 2 top 4 placements speak to her solid social game. In Big Brother 19, after a promising first week of successful campaigning, Christmas decides to spend the rest of the competition sucking Paul's toes. At Final 3, she could have won against Paul or Josh, but gave up and told them to take each other to the Final 2, stating that money was for poor people and that she could pay her own lawsuits. In Big Brother 22, Christmas played a much more solid game, staying socially integrated the whole time. While she wasn't able to take out the Cody Nicole power structure, had Christmas won the Final 4 veto, she would have had a decent shot at the win.
45. Dick Donato often goes by the nickname Evil Dick after famous stuntman Evel Knievel. They're pretty similar, except instead of making cool motorcycle jumps, he harasses people on Twitter. In BB8, despite being hated by the entire house, Dick was able to get him and his daughter all the way to the final 2, securing the win for himself. While he did in part achieve this by some smart strategic moves and competition wins, there are a number of instances where he would have been out if not for the America's Player twist. In Big Brother 13, Dick was unfortunately taken out in week 1 because of outside circumstances. 44. Erica from Big Brother 4 and 7 made 2 deep runs at the game, but she did not have the chops to take a win. This is possibly related to her going for 2 of the jankiest looking dudes I've ever seen. Erica was able to claim 2 high placements of 2nd and 4th from playing low-key games. In Big Brother 4, Erica may have been the winner if she won the Final 4 veto. In Big Brother 7, she was manipulated by Chilltown and probably wouldn't have got the jury votes against anyone. Though, her best move does come from Big Brother 7, when she convinced Janelle to vote out Will instead of herself, guaranteeing herself $50,000. 43. Ian from Big Brother 14 and 22 was pretty unaware of what was going on, but his likability helped him last long in his seasons. In Big Brother 14, Ian was able to claim a low-tier win. He was able to flip when he needed to and win comps when he needed to, but he was saved by a number of lucky breaks. At the end of the game, he beats Dan in the final 2. This is partially due to his likability and partially because people thought Dan was the devil who took on human form and decided to partake in a goofy reality show. In Big Brother 22, Ian came back and made the decision to play the low-key game again. Ian got along well with a lot of the cast and relied on Nicole to get him from week to week. Though, when he was on the block against Tyler in week 6, he didn't have enough pull to stay.
42.
Rachel from Big Brother 12 and 13 was disliked by most other house guests, but was able to make up for it with competitions and good luck. In her first season, Rachel is constantly in danger until her week 5 eviction. On Big Brother 13, Rachel is able to win the season thanks to a few strong bonds and winning competitions at the right times. Still, she was pretty heavily aided by the Pandora's Box twist, allowing her to save both herself and Jordan with one veto. Additionally, taking Dodge Caliber to the end was pretty risky as Rachel claimed a narrow 4-3 victory.
41. Nicole in Big Brother 2 was a very underrated player. In week 1, despite being targeted by the HOH, Nicole is able to get the votes to stay. She then goes on to control the game with Hardy. Until the final 4, every week her target went home. At the end of the game, Nicole was not respected by the jury, giving herself a second place finish. 40. Karen from Big Brother 5 was a very good social player. After requesting to speak to the manager, she would likely be able to return her out-of-warranty microwave for a full refund plus $50 in-store credit. Karen helped with the first ever backdoor and was a pretty strategic player throughout the whole game. If the Final 5 veto didn't allow Drew and Cowboy to team up with Diane, Karen would have a very good shot at the win. 39. Frankie from Big Brother 16 is an E-list celebrity that made a decent run at Big Brother. Early on, Frankie was able to integrate himself into large alliances such as the Bomb Squad and the Detonators. For many weeks, he was able to help carry these alliances with frequent comp wins. After Frankie was targeted in week 7, Frankie was able to reintegrate himself into the house for a while. At Final 5, Frankie gets screwed by the rewind twist, where his HOH didn't count. If this didn't happen, Frankie may have been able to win out, but he'd have to win Final 4 veto, Final HOH, and take out Derek. 38. Janelle from Big Brother 6, 7, 14, and 22 is one of the best characters the show has ever seen. In Big Brother 6 and 7, Janelle was incredibly skilled at competitions. She won a combined 13 HOH and POVs, and she set the single season record on Big Brother 7. The competition wins often made up for some questionable strategic moves, such as letting Howie nominate James and Sarah in Big Brother 6 and nominating Marcellus in Big Brother 7. In Big Brother 6, she could have won had she been able to drag Howie all the way to the final 2. In Big Brother 7, she could have won had she won the final HOH. In her later 2 seasons, Janelle had early exits. This is probably because of her continued rivalry with nurses and her not being able to compensate her threat level with competitions.
37. Joseph Charles from Big Brother 20 was trash at competitions, however he was able to make a deep run using his solid social game. Despite not being in either of the big alliances, JC was able to remain well integrated with people on both sides. In week 8, JC is able to convince Fessy to nominate and evict his own alliance member Scotty. If JC won the final HOH, he would have been very likely to win the game, but he didn't.
36. Danielle Donato is a solid competitor that sometimes made some poor strategic decisions. In Big Brother 8, Danielle won an impressive 2 HOHs and 5 of the 11 vetoes. However, her social game was not great and she wasn't being seen as having very much self-agency, resulting in a 5-2 loss against her strange father. In BB13, Danielle made some bold moves by turning against the Veterans Alliance. She dominated some HOHs, but she was targeted by the Veterans as soon as they got power post-jury. This resulted in an 8th place finish. In BB22, Danielle was a big force in the committee alliance that dominated most of the game. Ultimately though, she was taken out on Tyler's HOH and she didn't have the votes to save herself against Nicole. Perhaps she should have tried harder to take out Tyler earlier or position herself better in the alliance.
35.
Adam from Big Brother 9 was able to take a win with a strong social game and under-the-radar strategy. This was very unlike his drug ring, which was not kept in any way under the radar. Against any opposition, Adam's alliance was able to win comps and maneuver to the final 3. From here, Adam was guaranteed to win no matter who won the final HOH and ended up with an impressive 6-1 victory.
Number 34.
Austin from Big Brother 17 is an underrated player who was able to keep himself off the block until the final 6. He could have made a decent run for the win if the final 5 veto had played out differently. In week 5, Austin is nearly put up after the veto when he reveals information about Liz and Julia to Jason. However, Austin is able to talk his way out of being backdoored, unlike Jason. For the next 7 rounds, Austin keeps his alliance with Liz and her twin sister completely safe until the final 6. After not taking opportunities to evict Vanessa, Austin is blindsided when Vanessa evicts him at final 5, leaving him to walk onto the stage barefoot.
33.
Amanda from Big Brother 15 used her abrasive personality to take control of the house for most of the season. While she frequently clashed and made enemies, most of the time Amanda was able to come out on top. At Final 7, the whole house, minus the pizza delivery boy, turned on her. While she came close to winning the veto and was impressively able to flip Alyssa's vote, it wasn't enough for her to stay.
32.
While the producers were busy stealing dry erase markers from preschool whiteboards, Christy from Big Brother 21 was able to join the house with an established ally in Tommy. Christy used this advantage to gain control over the game and make some notable plays. In week 4, she was able to leverage her diamond veto power to get Cliff to nominate her target without having to use her veto. In week 6, when a shot was taken against her alliance, Christy was left off the block despite her prominent position, and in week 8, she was able to save herself by flipping the vote against Annalise. At Final 6, Christy is taken out because of her poor relationships with the remaining house guests and her lackluster competition abilities. When Nicole sides with Jackson and Holly over Christy and Tommy, Christy is voted out over Tommy. She was unable to win the HOH or veto to save herself.
31. Tiffany from Big Brother 23 was able to keep a large alliance hidden and intact all the way to the final 6. Tiffany is credited with starting and leading the Cookout Alliance. Her strong relationships meant that she could do most of the legwork to move the Cookout forward and avoid nomination for herself until the final 6. Unfortunately, her relationships within the Cookout were not strong enough. She's taken out by Kyland and does not have the votes to stay. 30. Jordan from Big Brother 11 and 13 was impressively able to get a win and a 4th place from playing low-key and being nice. Anytime somebody wanted to take a shot at Jordan's alliance, they'd always go for her last. Jordan won Big Brother 11 with a 5-2 vote. This includes Jesse and Lydia's votes, which she got over their alliance member Natalie. In Big Brother 13, assuming Rachel still wins veto, Jordan is likely out at Final 6 if not for the Pandora's box twist. Jordan actually gets out at Final 4 when Adam wins HOH and Porsche wins veto. With a couple of things going differently, Jordan could have won the season and become the first ever 2-time winner, and I'd probably be talking about her in like 5 minutes instead of now.
29.
Tommy from Big Brother 21 had an advantage coming into the game due to the producers being too busy huffing dry erase markers to do preliminary background research. Although his relationship with Christy was a huge advantage, Tommy still made numerous alliances in the house. His likability kept him off the block until the final 6. Even when people took shots at his alliance, he was always close enough to the HOH to keep himself safe, and when he and Christy were on the block together, she was voted off unanimously. At Final 5, Tommy is outplayed by Jackson when he fails to convince Nicole and Cliff of Jackson's lie.
28.
Kevin from Big Brother 11 and 22 is a player that rarely took control of the game but was skilled at coasting while at the bottom of the house. In Big Brother 11 at Final 6, after not doing much all season, Kevin's able to trick Jeff into saving him with the veto by creating a lie that Russell is targeting Jeff. Kevin's cutthroat endgame could have got him a win had he won the final HOH. In Big Brother 22, Kevin plays a disappointing coasting game with little agency, however he's able to last the second longest of the non-committee alliance members.
27.
Corey from Big Brother 18 played a solid game from start to finish. He was able to skate past the early game due to his solid spot in the majority alliance. When the house flips against Polly, Corey gets lumped in and finds himself on the bottom of the house. After Polly leaves, Corey and Nicole are able to gain back the allegiance of Paul and Victor and James and Natalie before turning on both pairs. At Final 4, Corey is taken out when Paul wins the veto and sends him home over Nicole. Had Corey or Nicole won the veto, Corey would potentially be in a great spot to beat Nicole in the final 2.
26. Mike Boogie from Big Brother 2, 7, and 14 had moments of good strategy but was far too polarizing to consistently get high placements. In Big Brother 2, Mike won the first ever HOH and created the first ever alliance. However, Mike did not make good use of them and he failed to get his target out on his HOH and then was sent home week 4. Mike won Big Brother 7 from being a sidekick to Will, but he certainly pulled his own weight. During the season, Mike was able to manipulate and backstab house guests, win competitions, and help position himself into a power position. Then in Big Brother 14, after the coach's twist was disbanded, Mike was impressively able to aid in taking out Janelle, but he was ultimately targeted and sent home 2 weeks later.
25.
Shelly from Big Brother 13 was a player that was able to suck up to the Veterans Alliance to get her through the early parts of the season, then turn on the Alliance before they were able to run away with the game. At this point, the best of the Big Brother fandom proceeded to walk their unwashed neckbeards and mangy cats down to the post office to send Shelly's 8-year-old daughter their well wishes. I mean death threats. While Shelly was pretty bad at competitions, her social game and strategic positioning kept her safe for most of the game. At Final 6, Shelly gets screwed over by the Pandora's box twist that saved Rachel and Jordan. Had this twist not happened, Shelly could have made a decent run for the win.
24. Diane from Big Brother 5 and 7 was a savvy player who came very close to the win. In Big Brother 5, Diane was able to stay in control nearly the entire game and was never on the blocked eviction vote until the final 4. At the final 5, Diane flips by winning the veto and taking out Karen. At the final 4, Diane is saved by Cowboy even over his own sister. At the final 3, Diane was set to win the game until she drunkenly revealed to Drew that she had the votes to win. After that, Drew decided to vote her out. Between seasons, Diane worked at the Tipton Hotel dealing with all Zach and Cody's antics. In All-Stars, Diane went out 4th due to a lack of connections, a rivalry with Janelle, and Big Brother 6 winning 4 HOHs in a row.
23.
Enzo from Big Brother 12 and 22 is an amazing social player whose laid-back gameplay stops him from securing a win. In Big Brother 12, Enzo created the Brigade Alliance and rode it until the final 3 where he got cut by a fellow Alliance member. In Big Brother 22, Enzo was able to solidly integrate himself within the Majority Alliance. With his allies winning HOH every week, Enzo was able to avoid being nominated the whole season. After getting taken to the final 2 by Cody, he gets stomped 9-0. In both seasons, the jury doesn't view Enzo as a strong contender, and making big moves could have been risky but easily would have helped the jury see him as a bigger player.
22. Memphis from Big Brother 10 and 22 is a pretty good player. 21. Lisa in Big Brother 3 played a low-key game, but it was enough to get herself the win. While she was never controlling much of the game, she made strong social bonds which benefited her. In Week 6, she voted against bringing back her showmance over fears that would distract her. At the final 3, Lisa won a Do or Die HOH, which led her to $500,000 and $2,002, which can be used to buy like puka shell necklaces and Tamagotchis. 20. Jason from Big Brother 3 played an amazing social game which got him within reach of the win. His great relationships with the house and his secret alliance with Danielle allowed him to get all the way to Final 3 without ever being nominated. If he or Danielle won the final HOH, he probably would have won the game. Though, if Jason evicted Lisa at Final 4, it may have increased his chances at winning had he done that. 19. Eric from Big Brother 8 was an incredible social player, but he was not able to have his strategic or his competition abilities shown due to the America's Player twist. Eric had all his votes and moves decided by the voting audience. The votes were often against his best interests, but he was forced to do them anyways. Worse, in Week 5, a Big Brother fan's mangy cats went hungry for a week due to them spending all their money contracting a banner plane to expose Eric's game. After being backdoored, Eric was impressively able to flip the votes and stay. Eric was able to make it all the way to Final 5 when he got sent home in the double eviction.
18.
Jackson, Minecraft, Steve, and Mickey from Big Brother 21 is one of the few winners from the HD seasons that didn't use any sort of under-the-radar strategy. Jackson dominated competitions with 8 combined head of household and veto wins, tying the single-season record for men. His brash nature made him a lot of enemies and eventually turned his alliance against him. Jackson's social game was aggressive, but he was still agreeable enough to get into alliances. While he made a couple of questionable strategic moves along the way, as well as landing himself in a few must-win scenarios, his strategic decisions and plays from Final 7 onwards solidified him as being one of the best players of the season. At Final 7, he takes out Jessica, setting up Nicole and Cliff to target Tommy and Christy. At Final 5, Jackson's able to trick Nicole and Cliff into evicting Tommy by convincing them that he and Tommy had been working together recently. At Final 4, he convinces Holly, his own showmance, to throw the head of household because he knows that Holly would be evicted over him if they were on the block together. Jackson's moves, comps, and oh my god, is that the Horizon jawline, gain the respect of the jury, getting him a 6-3 victory over Holly.
17. Tyler from Big Brother 20 and 22 could have been a top tier player if a few things went differently. In Big Brother 20, Tyler ran the pre-jury. Every week, what he wanted happened. Such as in Week 2, when he convinced Caitlyn to backdoor Swaggy C, even though they were in alliance. With Tyler's social pull, he was able to decimate the Fauteuil alliance. After that point, he was mostly on cruise control as his strong relationships within his alliance sailed him to Final 2. Final 4, Tyler throws the veto competition. If he were to instead win the competition and take out Casey, he would easily claim a win against Angela. Tyler barely loses against Casey with a 5-4 vote. While some of the jury had some strange reasons for voting Casey, Tyler simply was not able to get the votes. In Big Brother 22, Tyler clearly did not have his heart in the game. Instead of $500,000, Tyler is playing for shoutouts for Angela's plant-based cookbook. In Week 5, Tyler attempts to quit the game before someone named Halloween or something stops him. Apart from that, Tyler played decently. He got in the majority alliance, he was able to survive on the block against Ian, and he was able to take out his main opposition in Danielle. At the Final 8, Tyler attempts to make a big move by taking out Nicole, but he's unable to flip Enzo. Then, at the Final 6, Tyler is taken out by Cody. 16. Casey's loyalty and her competition prowess earned herself $500,000. Early on, Casey became part of the Level 6 Alliance. While she wasn't a very strategic player, her decision to stay loyal to Level 6 paid off with them being the stronger alliance. Casey was so loyal and respectful that the words then magically appeared on her arms one day. Casey had a record-tying 5 vetoes and won with a bitter and close 5-4 vote.
15.
Steve from Big Brother 17 was a strong player who openly ate paint chips to convince the other house guests that he was weak. After a rocky start to the game, Steve was able to recover and make some allies. He was always aware of how he was being perceived and purposely changed his persona in order to get carried, even harder than I'm carrying this video. When Steve blindsided Vanessa at Final 3, he gained the respect of the jury, earning him the win. Steve's win wasn't flawless. He got put on the block more than any other HT season winner and also made a questionable decision in throwing the Final 4 veto, leaving him to rely on the last competition to get to Final 2.
14. Drew from Big Brother 5 is a pretty underrated winner. Drew starts the game in the 4 Horsemen Alliance. When that alliance becomes doomed, Drew jumps ship and stays safe for the rest of the game. Drew won a bunch of comps and was never eligible to be voted off the whole season. At the Final 3, Drew decided to cut his showman, stating that Cowboy was more attractive than her. This led to Drew's 4-3 win. 13. Xavier from Big Brother 23 was able to play a solid under-the-radar game, netted him $750,000. In Week 1, Xavier became part of the Cookout Alliance. This alliance was able to maintain strong loyalty. Whenever anybody wanted to target X, the alliance swooped in to stop it. The Cookout made it all the way to the Final 6 intact. After weeks of people telling Kylan not to trust Xavier and not to take him to the Final 2, Kylan responds to this very helpful advice by keeping Xavier off the block at the Final 6 and using the veto on X at the Final 5. Xavier kindly returns the favor by taking Kylan out at 4, where Kylan offers some very helpful comments about Xavier's nephew. Then, Xavier was able to continue his comp streak by winning the final HOH and getting himself the 3rd ever unanimous victory. 12. Maggie from Big Brother 6 was a very successful cult leader. She was able to ensure strong loyalty in her alliance throughout the entire game. Additionally, in Week 5, she was able to convince Howie to nominate James and Sarah despite them mostly being in Howie's alliance. When Maggie's opposition won HOH, Maggie was able to ensure that she never went home. At the end of the game, Yvette won the final HOH and took Maggie, giving Maggie a narrow 4-3 victory. Notably though, if Janelle won the final HOH, she would have taken Yvette.
11.
Hayden Rockhair from Big Brother 12 is a skilled player in every aspect of the game. Hayden's charisma and social game got him into a strong alliance and helped him to form bonds with most people in the house. Hayden's competitive ability scored him the most competition wins of his season, winning 4 HOH competitions and a veto. Hayden's strategic game saw him successfully remove his biggest competitors and position himself out of danger. His performance on Survivor reaffirms that he's a strong player and would likely perform well in another Big Brother season. Hayden won against Lane with a narrow 4-3 victory, and while he could have taken Enzo for a safer beat, it's undeniable that he earned his votes.
Number 10. Danielle from Big Brother 3 and 7 was a dominant player who would have made a great winner. In Big Brother 3, she made it all the way to the Final 2, never being nominated, by influencing people and making smart moves. At the Final 5, she makes a bold play by blindsiding Marcellus after convincing him not to use his own veto on himself. Danielle found herself in the Final 2 against Lisa. From there, everyone became salty. The jury didn't end up voting for Danielle to win because of her diary rooms and her playstyle. The producers and the audience felt that this was such a robbery that they decided to change the rules for the next season by sequestering the jury. They then made Lisa clear up an entire summer and stand at the front of the All-Stars house only to not let her in. Danielle would have likely won against Amy had she told Jason to vote out Lisa instead. In Big Brother 7, Danielle's game was not quite as impressive. That being said, she was still able to make quite a deep run while facing way more adversity. In this season, Danielle was taken out at Final 6 after Chilltown convinced Erica to backdoor her.
Number 9.
Paul from Big Brother 18 and 19 got second place by a vote of 5-4 2 years in a row. This demonstrates both a lack of jury management as well as considerable skill to get so close to the win twice. Over Paul's 2 seasons, Paul was able to claim a combined 14 HOH and veto wins despite often throwing competitions. In Big Brother 18, Paul played a solid underdog game and managed to reintegrate after being knocked down multiple times. Paul likely would have won this season by simply taking James to the end over Nicole or giving better jury answers, as they only would have needed one more vote to win. In Big Brother 19, Paul completely dominated the game front to back, having significant control pretty much every week. In this season, Paul's biggest achievements were getting Ramsey's out on Jessica's HOH, controlling Alex's HOH right after they secretly masterminded Jason's eviction, and convincing the whole house to throw a running competition to a one-legged war veteran. With better jury answers, better goodbye messages, or taking someone else to the final 2, Paul could have won Big Brother 19. Paul greatly benefited from multiple lucky breaks over the last 2 seasons, however Paul was always a solid proactive player.
8. June from Big Brother 4 was able to perfect the floater strategy, leading to an impressive win. She would consistently align herself with HOH winners to remain safe and rarely made enemies. June never had to win a competition to save herself. In the mid-game, June recognizes that she has to take Allison to the end in order to win. She does this successfully and wins with a 6-1 vote.
7. Nicole from Big Brother 16, 18, and 22 has the record for most days spent in the Big Brother house with 255. This relates well to the average Big Brother fan who also does not leave their house for long periods of time. In Big Brother 16, Nicole had good relationships in the house, but she was not in the main alliance and she wasn't able to break in. In Big Brother 18, Nicole played a lot better. She got in the large alliance and was able to maneuver well. After week 7, when the house turns on Polly and Nicole is left out, Nicole is able to gain back the allegiance of James and Natalie and Paul and Victor. At the end of the game, Paul takes Nicole for Nicole to win 5-4. In Big Brother 22, Nicole is again able to integrate well for the whole game. She participated in probably the most boring alliance in the show's history, and when Tyler and Christmas try to take her out at Final 8, Enzo refuses and evicts David instead. At the Final 3, Cody wins the final HOH and then cuts Nicole. Ironically, if Nicole won, she would pull a Cody and take him to the Final 2, and lose, rather than taking Enzo, who she would win against.
6.
Andy Heron from Big Brother 15 perfected the floater strategy, earning himself a top-tier win. Andy was able to use his social and strategic game to play all sides of the house and stay safe the whole time. At Final 7, when Andy had to vote off Amanda, he was able to pull an impressive move by pinning his vote on Alyssa in order to get McCrae to target her the following round. Despite backstabbing most of the jury, they respected Andy's game, getting him a 7-2 win. Due to Andy being cast on Big Brother Racism Edition, he's pretty much been blacklisted from competing a second time.
5.
Vanessa from Big Brother 17's background as a professional poker player, coupled with her driven personality, made a highly skilled competitor. Vanessa's emotional manipulation, competitive ability, and strategic mind gave her a large degree of control over the competition. Whenever Vanessa lost control, she found herself with a target on her back, but was almost always able to find a way out. In week 6, Vanessa pins the Jason backdoor plan on Clay and Shelley while keeping herself off the block. In week 7, when Becky tries to backdoor Vanessa, Vanessa campaigns and manages to stay with a unanimous vote. In week 9, Vanessa wins a clutch veto and manages to escape a potential backdoor. At the final 6, Vanessa is able to convince Julia to target Austin in the veto competition, keeping herself safe from a potential renom. At the final 3, after surviving more backdoors than a gay porn star, Vanessa was blindsided and voted out by Steve. It remains to be seen how well Vanessa would perform on a second season. However, had Vanessa or Liz won the final HOH, she would have finished the game as a top-tier winner.
4. Cody from Big Brother 16 and 22 made one of the stupidest moves in Big Brother history. In Big Brother 16, Cody worked with Derek to get to Final 3. He held some good relationships, won competitions, and stayed relatively safe the whole game. This would have been enough for Cody to win had he evicted Derek instead of Victoria. Unfortunately, he didn't, and this dumb maneuver cost him $450,000. Cody came back in Big Brother 22 and completely redeemed himself. He controlled the entire season and never ended up on the block. At Final 3, he blindsided his ally Nicole for a 9-0 win. 3. Derek from Big Brother 16 had the most dominant win of all time. Derek was able to use his past as an undercover cop to convince everyone that he was young and hip. Despite there being at least 4 nominees each week, Derek was never nominated. He influenced every HOH and was so convincing he made the entire house look like dumb, idiot, bastard fools for not taking him out. At the Final 3, Cody won HOH and decided he was too hot for money, taking Derek to the Final 2 for an easy 7-2 win. Cody gave up $450,000 because Derek was so damn cool, and definitely not a cop. Recently, Derek's been too busy fighting the good fight by proving OJ's innocence to return for another season.
2. Will Kirby from Big Brother 2 and 7 proved that you do not have to win competitions in order to be an incredible Big Brother player. In Big Brother 2, Will played from the bottom. He used his charm and charisma in order to get the votes to stay week after week. In week 8 of Big Brother 2, Will is able to manipulate Hardy and Nicole into keeping him under false promises. While it's certainly arguable that he got lucky with who won the Final 4 and the Final 3 HOH, Will was able to secure a solid win. In Big Brother 7, Will walks into a house full of all-stars as the only winner and then runs the season. Nearly every week, Will is able to work his magic in order to stay and play all sides of the house. His most impressive moves from this season are when he convinced Janelle to nominate Marcellus and when he convinced Erica to nominate Danielle. At Final 4, Will gets blindsided by Janelle. Had anyone else won the Final Four veto, Will would have a very high chance at winning the season and becoming the first ever two-time winner. And the number 1 greatest Big Brother player. Dan Gheesling from Big Brother 10 and 14 is the greatest Big Brother player of all time. He claimed a top-tier win and second place from using his strong manipulation skills. He could sell wood to a forest. He could sell a cage to a lion. He could convince Julie Chen Moonves to change her last name. In Big Brother 10, Dan gets off to a rocky start. He loses his close ally in the first week and gets nominated in the second week. After this, Dan is able to recover and get into a good spot in the house. In week 7, Dan convinces Ollie to throw the HOH to him, all while intending to take out Ollie's alliance member. Dan was also able to keep his alliance with Memphis somewhat under the radar in order to avoid being nominated together. Despite lying to and backstabbing most of the jury, Dan was able to win with the first ever unanimous vote. In Big Brother 14, Dan made it all the way to the end while likely taking 3 Monster Energies a day. After the reset, Dan is able to take out 2 big fish in Janelle and Boogie. This came with some blowback. In week 7, Dan was nominated next to a lesser player. He lost the veto and the whole house is ready to send him home. Nearly any other player would have gone home in this situation. But Dan decides to hold a fake funeral for himself, throws his alliance under the bus, and convinces 2 people who don't really like him to save him. At the Final Four, Dan guarantees himself Final 2 by getting Danielle to save him with the veto, and then blindsiding her boyfriend. At the Final 2, Dan loses 6-1. The jury was mad at the way he played the game, but they also refused to vote for a former winner. Second place was probably the best Dan could get in this season without dragging Boogie all the way to the Final 2. Anyways, Dan's the best player.